The Iconian Empire had enslaved 1,000 worlds and slaughtered billions of sentient beings, but that was before the humans showed up. For millennia, the Iconians had terrorized the galaxy. With their massive warships and planet-killing superweapons, they crushed all who defied them. Entire civilizations were erased from existence. The few allowed to live became slaves. 18-year-old Zorlak stood tall and proud as he prepared to join their ranks. His father, Zargan, a decorated Iconian admiral, had always taught him that this was the highest calling, to bring order to a chaotic universe, to make lesser species submit or perish. "You will help ensure Iconian supremacy as I have," Zargan told his son. He described the thrill of bombarding enemy planets until their surfaces turned to glass, of marching captured foes into labor camps. The strong rule the weak. That is the way of things. Zorlax departed for training, determined to prove himself a worthy successor. He would subjugate whole star systems in the Empire's name, but neither father nor son could foresee the cataclysm to come. Humanity was about to enter the galactic stage, and when they did, the Iconian reign of terror would face its greatest challenge yet. The conquerors were about to become the conquered unless Zorlax could stop it. Zorlax gripped the controls of the combat simulator, his eyes darting across the holographic display. Enemy ships swarmed around him, their laser cannons flashing, but Zorlax was faster. He spun his virtual fighter craft, dodging the incoming fire with ease. His fingers flew over the weapons panel, launching a barrage of missiles that turned the enemy formation into a field of exploding wreck-egg. Simulation complete, the computer announced. Top score achieved. Zorlax allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. He had beaten his own best time yet again. At this rate, he would be leading his own squadron in no time. As he exited the simulator, Zorlax was greeted by his friend and fellow recruit, Xyloth. The two had bonded during their grueling training regimen, pushing each other to excel. Where Zorlax was a prodigy in the cockpit, Xyloth was a tactical genius, able to outmaneuver the simulation's eye opponents with clever feints and ambushes. "Looks like you've set the bar even higher," Xyloth said, clapping Zorlax on the shoulder. "At this rate, the instructors will have to rewrite the program just to keep up with you." Zorlax grinned. "Just wait until we're out there for real. The Empire's enemies won't stand a chance against us. Care about that." Xyloth's expression turned serious. "Have you heard the news? Apparently, we've made first contact with a new species. They call themselves humans." Zorlax scoffed. "So what? They'll submit or be destroyed just like all the others." "I wouldn't be so sure. Word is they're putting up quite a fight. The Empire's first conquest fleet was almost completely wiped out in the initial assault." "What?" Zorlax was stunned. In all the Empire's long history of conquest, no species had ever managed to repel an attack fleet before. "How is that possible?" Xyloth shrugged. "No one knows, but I have a feeling we're about to find out." As if on cue, the base intercom crackled to life. "Attention all personnel. Prepare for immediate deployment. The humans have engaged Empire forces in the Korax system. All combat-ready units are to report to their designated transports for departure to the front. I repeat, all combat-ready units to your transports." Zorlax and Xyloth exchanged a determined look. This was what they had trained for, the chance to prove themselves in real combat against an enemy that dared to defy the Empire's might. They quickly donned their battle armor and grabbed their weapons, joining the flood of Iconian soldiers rushing to the landing bay. As they marched up the ramp of a waiting transport ship, Zorlax felt a rush of excitement. He would show these upstart humans the folly of their resistance. He would crush them and grind their cities to dust, as his father had done to so many others. The Iconian Empire would prevail as it always had, and Zorlax would be there to make sure of it. The transport ship shuddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot from the friction. Zorlax checked his weapons for the 100th time, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Beside him, Zoloth fidgeted with the straps of his armor, his usually confident demeanor replaced by a tense frown. "I don't like this," Zoloth muttered. "The humans should have been crushed by now. What are they doing that's giving our forces so much trouble?" Zorlax shook his head. "Whatever it is, we'll put a stop to it. The Empire has never been defeated, and it won't start now." The ship lurched as it touched down, and the loading ramp hissed open. Zorlax and Zoloth charged out with their fellow soldiers, weapons at the ready, but what they saw made them falter in their tracks. The human city before them was a ruined wasteland, its buildings reduced to rubble by orbital bombardment. Smoke choked the air, and the stench of burnt flesh was overwhelming. But amidst the devastation, the humans fought on with a ferocity that Zorlax had never seen before. They hurled themselves at the Iconian lines, heedless of the withering fire that cut them down in droves. They used the wreckage of their city as cover, popping up to take shots at the Iconian troops before ducking back down. Some even charged forward with crude explosives strapped to their bodies, detonating themselves amidst the Iconian ranks. "They're insane," Zoloth breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "They're throwing away their lives like they mean nothing." Zorlax watched as a human soldier dragged his wounded comrade to safety, only to be shot in the back by a Iconian sniper. The soldier collapsed atop his friend, shielding him with his own body as he breathed his last. "No," Zorlax said slowly. "They're sacrificing themselves for each other. They fight not for glory or conquest, but to protect their own." It was a concept so alien to the Iconian way of thinking that Zorlax could scarcely wrap his mind around it. In the Empire, the individual was nothing, the state everything. To die for another was seen as weakness, not valor. And yet, as the battle raged on, Zorlax couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for the humans' bravery and selflessness. They were outmatched in every way, but still they'd fought, driven by a cause greater than themselves. The Iconian forces eventually prevailed, as Zorlax knew they would. The humans' primitive weapons and tactics were no match for the Empire's superior technology, but the victory felt hollow somehow, tainted by the wanton destruction and loss of life. As Zorlax picked his way through the rubble, he came across the bodies of a human woman and child, their lifeless eyes staring up at the smoke-filled sky. They were civilians, non-combatants, and yet they had been slaughtered just the same, victims of the Empire's indiscriminate bombardment. Zorlax felt a sudden wave of revulsion wash over him. This was not the glorious conquest he had envisioned. This was butchery, plain and simple. And for what? To subjugate a species that had done nothing to deserve such a fate. He turned to Zoloth, who looked similarly shaken. "Is this what we're fighting for?" Zorlax asked quietly. "Is this what the Empire stands for?" Zoloth didn't answer, but the troubled look in his eyes said it all. Zorlax huddled in the corner of the cell, his arms wrapped around his knees. Zoloth sat beside him, head bowed in defeat. The human guards watched them impassively from the other side of the force field, their weapons held at the ready. Zorlax still couldn't believe they had been captured. The mission had been going smoothly at first, their stealth ship slipping past the human defenses undetected. But then, just as they were about to land and infiltrate the target facility, all hell had broken loose. Human fighters had appeared out of nowhere, swarming their ship like angry hornets. Zorlax had fought with all his skill, but it was no use. Their ship was crippled, and they were forced to crash land in hostile territory. The humans had been on them in moments, storming the wreckage with ruthless efficiency. Zorlax and Zoloth had been dragged from the cockpit, battered and bleeding, and thrown into this cell. And now, they waited for the inevitable interrogation and execution. The force field shimmered and a tall human male stepped through. He was older than the other soldiers, his face weathered and scarred, but his eyes were sharp and piercing, and he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. "I am Captain Marcus," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "I will be overseeing your interrogation." Zorlax braced himself for the pain to come. He had been trained to resist torture, but he knew everyone had their breaking point. He only hoped he could hold out long enough to protect the Empire's secrets. But to his surprise, Marcus made no move to harm them. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sat down facing them calmly. "I know what you're expecting," he said, "but we're not going to torture you. That's not our way." Zorlax couldn't hide his disbelief. "Then what do you want from us?" Marcus leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I want to understand you. I want to know what drives the Iconian Empire to conquer and destroy, to inflict such suffering on innocent beings." Zorlax scoffed. "You wouldn't understand. You're weak, all of you. The strong rule, the weak. That is the way of the universe." Marcus shook his head. "No. That is the way of tyrants and bullies. True strength comes from protecting the weak, not oppressing them." And so began a series of conversations that would change Zorlax's life forever. Day after day, Marcus would come to their cell and engage them in discussion, probing their beliefs and challenging their assumptions. At first, Zorlax resisted, clinging to the dogma he had been taught since birth. But slowly, gradually, he found himself questioning everything he had ever known. "Why do we conquer?" Marcus asked. "What purpose does it serve beyond feeding our own ego and greed?" "We bring order to the chaos," Zorlax insisted. "We unite the galaxy under our rule. But at what cost? How many billions have died? How many worlds have been shattered in pursuit of this order? Is that truly a price worth paying?" Zorlax had no answer. He thought of the ruined human city, of the woman and child lying dead in the rubble. What order had their deaths served? Marcus spoke of the humans' way of life, of their belief in freedom and self-determination. He spoke of the bonds of love and loyalty that held their society together, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "When we fight for each other," he said. "We fight to protect our homes, our families, our way of life. That is what gives us strength, even when all hope seems lost." Zorlax felt something stirring within him, a faint flicker of doubt that grew with each passing day. He looked at Zilloth and saw the same uncertainty reflected in his friend's eyes. Could Marcus be right? Could there be another way to live beyond the endless cycle of conquest and subjugation? Could the Empire's way be wrong? Zorlax didn't know, but for the first time in his life, he was willing to consider the possibility. Zorlax paced back and forth in his cell, his mind racing. He had spent countless hours talking with Captain Marcus, debating the merits of the Empire's way of life versus the humans. And now, with the war reaching its climax, he knew he had to act. He turned to Zilloth, who was watching him with a mix of concern and curiosity. "I've made a decision," Zorlax said, his voice low but firm. "We have to get out of here. We have to stop this war before it's too late." Zilloth's eyes widened. "What are you talking about? We can't just abandon the Empire." Zorlax shook his head. "The Empire is wrong, Zilloth. Can't you see that? All this conquest, all this destruction, it's not sustainable. It's not right." He gestured to the cell around them. "Look at what the humans have done. They've treated us with respect, even though we're their enemies. They've shown us that there's another way to live, a better way." Zilloth looked uncertain, but Zorlax pressed on. "We have to convince the others. We have to show them that the humans are not our enemies, but our potential allies. Together, we can build a new future for the galaxy." It took some convincing, but eventually Zilloth agreed to help. They spent the next few days carefully planning their escape, studying the guards' routines, and looking for weaknesses in the security system. When the moment came, they made their move. Zorlax feigned illness, collapsing to the floor of the cell and writhing in apparent agony. As the guards rushed in to investigate, Zilloth sprang into action, disarming them with a series of lightning-fast strikes. Together, they fought their way out of the detention block, stealing a shuttle and blasting off into space. They set a course for the Iconian fleet, determined to confront Zorlax's father and the other high-ranking officers. As they approached the massive warships, Zorlax felt a sense of trepidation. He knew that what he was about to do would be seen as treason, that he would be branded a traitor to the Empire, but he also knew that it was the right thing to do. They docked with the flagship and marched straight to the bridge, ignoring the shocked looks and murmurs of the crew. Zorlak strode up to his father, who was standing at the command console, his face a mask of anger and disbelief. "What is the meaning of this?" Zargan demanded, his voice booming across the bridge. "How dare you show your face here after betraying your own people?" Zorlak stood his ground, meeting his father's gaze without flinching. "I have not betrayed our people, father. I have seen the truth. The Empire's weight is wrong. We cannot continue down this path of destruction and oppression." He turned to the other officers who were watching the confrontation with a mix of fascination and horror. "The humans are not our enemies," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "They are brave and compassionate, and willing to fight for what they believe in. We have much to learn from them." Zorlak spoke of the things he had seen on Earth, of the humans' courage in the face of overwhelming odds. He spoke of the bonds of friendship and loyalty that held them together, even in the darkest of times. "We can be more than conquerors," he said, his eyes shining with passion. "We can be builders and explorers and allies. We can work together with the humans and other species to create a better future for all of us." For a moment, there was silence on the bridge. Then one by one the officers began to nod, murmuring their agreement. They had seen the toll the war had taken on their own people, the lives lost, and the worlds ruined. They knew that something had to change, but Zargan would not be swayed. "Traitors," he roared, drawing his weapon. "I will not allow this rebellion to stand." He fired at Zorlax, but Zilloth leaped in front of him, taking the blast in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide with shock and pain. Chaos erupted on the bridge as officers and crew members alike chose sides. Some stood with Zargan, while others rallied behind Zorlax, drawing their own weapons and opening fire. In the midst of the fighting, a warning klaxon sounded. The human forces had launched a surprise attack, catching the Iconian fleet off guard. The flagship shuddered as it was hit, alarms blaring and consoles sparking. Zorlax knew that this was their chance. With the fleet in disarray, they could force a surrender, ending the war once and for all. He barked orders to the loyal officers, coordinating a counterattack even as he dodged his father's furious blows. In the end, it was Zargan who fell, shot down by one of his own men. The flagship's shields collapsed, and the human ship swarmed in, disabling the Iconian vessels with surgical precision. Zolak stood on the bridge, watching as the Empire's once mighty fleet was brought to its knees. He felt a sense of sorrow for all the lives lost, but also a glimmer of hope for the future. As the human ships approached, he prepared to surrender, knowing that it was the only way to end the bloodshed. He thought of Captain Marcus, and of the lessons he had learned during his time in captivity. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Zorlax knew that he had a long road ahead of him to rebuild the Iconian society and forge a new alliance with the humans, but he was ready for the challenge, ready to lead his people into a new era of peace and cooperation. He took a deep breath, straightened his uniform, and stepped forward to meet the human delegation ready to begin the next chapter of his life. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.